Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of our webinars on engaging culturally and linguistically diverse communities. So that's this week's theme, but our overall series was on partnering with people from different demographics. So I'm just going to start sharing my slides now. If George, if you can nod, if you can see the slideshow perfectly, thank you so much. Great to see so many of you trickling in. I just see the numbers going up. Again, welcome to today's session. George will be our only speaker today, but he has lots of insights representing the Multicultural Communities Council of SA. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region. We recognize the Kaurna people's cultural, spiritual, physical, and emotional connection with their land. We honor and pay our respects to Kaurna elders, past, present, and all generations of Kaurna people now and into the future. So a quick background for those of you who are new to our Spotlight series. This is a month-long capacity building or education initiative that HTSA runs quarterly throughout the year. This year, we've only just begun with this series on partnering with people from different demographics, but in previous years, we've held several topics on the Spotlight series. We've covered, done deep dives in implementation science, health economics, co-design. The list is there at the bottom of the screen. And what this series includes is 4 weeks, 4 times 1 hour webinars, deep diving into the topics, so different aspects of those topics. And we share daily during that month on HTSA's social media accounts, LinkedIn, resources. So what are some available trainings that are relating to this topic? What are some latest publications, resources that are out there to support you in this area? So this initiative was brought through our organization, Health Translation SA. And we are South Australia's only statewide research translation center. We're accredited by the National Health and Medical Research Council. And our main aim and objective is to enable the timely and effective adoption of research outcomes throughout the SA health system. We want to improve people's health by improving the uptake of research into practice and policy. And we do that through 3 key pillars of activity or key priorities. And one of our priorities is to empower the people, is to actually enable researchers and clinicians to be better at translating evidence into practice. And that's where this initiative, the Spotlight series, falls into. We have a series of partners that make up who we are. Without our partners, we are nothing. But it's just a demonstration of how we're trying to reach across the state. So we partner with all the universities, the PHNs, both country and Adelaide, the Department of Health, SAMRI, which is where we're based, and Aboriginal Health Councils. As I introduced earlier, our topic this week is partnering with culturally and linguistically diverse communities. And next week is our last webinar of the series, which will be focusing on engaging youth in research. It's going to be a really exciting talk, so I really hope to see many of you there. And these topics were flagged from other initiatives that we've had with researchers, with consumers, with clinicians who have flagged how do we better engage with demographics that are not your usual individuals who raise their hands to engage in research. How do we reach out to those that are harder to reach for some people? So today's speaker is George Gouzounis. He's joining us from the MCCSA, which stands for the Multicultural Communities Council of SA. He'll be telling us about new tools, new rules, and how technology is reshaping work with diverse communities. So it's going to be a really interesting chat. A little bit about George. He specializes in projects that drive innovation, promote positive aging, and build sector capability through culturally responsive practice and emerging technologies. He is a certified trainer with the MCCSA's Cultural Q initiative, which I hope he tells us a little bit about at some point during his talk, which is delivering cultural intelligence training across sectors to support inclusive and effective service delivery. So I'm going to hand over to George now, who's going to discuss how to best engage with people who come from diverse communities. So I'll stop sharing my slides and I'll invite George to share his. Thank you.
And Agustina, can you see my screen?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. So thanks to you, and thank you to Health Translation SA for the invitation today. I will be speaking fast because I have so much to talk about. I didn't even know where to start really because we only have 1 hour. But a little bit about me, my background. So I have been working mainly in the aged care space for the past 8 years, though today I'll be speaking across the board for diverse communities. I have been working with Multicultural Communities Council for the past 3 years, and I'm also part of the New Mainstream, which is our market research brand for the organization. So outside of that, I'm chairing a national AI adoption in the aged care sector work group, and we have 15 organizations from around Australia. It is a new field. It's emerging now. To be honest, I will be touching on that as well. So yeah, I think we should just dive in. If you have any questions at any point, just feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be very happy to answer them at the end. So firstly, I would also like to acknowledge, I know Agustina did it, but I would also like to acknowledge on behalf of MCCSA that I am presenting today from the lands of the Ghana people, and to acknowledge elders of the Ghana people, past, present, and emerging. All right, so a little bit about Multicultural Communities Council of South Australia. This year we celebrate our 50th anniversary. It's a big year for us. We are the big body in South Australia, serving and empowering and advocating for the CALD communities of the state. So I am sure most of you will be familiar with this term, but the term CALD stands for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Communities. There has been a lot of discussion as to, what is included, what is excluded, because at the end of the day, we all have culture, and we will talk about culture quite a bit in today's presentation and what that means to each one of us. But generally speaking, it is discussed more in the context of non-Anglo cultures in Australia. So that is very briefly what MCCSA stands for. And our vision is an equitable, cohesive South Australia. So as part of MCCSA, we also have the New Mainstream, which is our, as I said, our market research brand and advisory service. So we connect researchers like yourselves, businesses and industries with CALD communities across South Australia. And there's a point there talking about decades of experience, strong community connections. That is the key, really. The whole presentation today has to do with the word connection, which is at the core of anything multicultural. But I'll get back to this in a while. So, okay, so firstly, let's try and define what is culture, because we're talking about multiculturalism, how to engage culturally and linguistically diverse communities. But what is culture? What is the definition of culture? And what is the definition that we live by here at Multicultural Communities Council? So there has been quite a few different definitions. There are some here, one from a dictionary. The second one is from one of the biggest advocates for multiculturalism and culture theories, Hofstede, and the third one as well. So the sum total of ways of living transmitted from one generation to the next, or it could be the collective programming of the mind. I like the third one, that is a blueprint for societal survival. You need to understand culture in order to survive in society. The other day, I read something that I thought it was quite interesting as well. It said that culture is everything that you do not genetically inherit from your mother, however, from your parents. However, there is research that has been done which shows that the baby develops preferences for flavors or music based on what the mother was listening or eating while the baby was still in the womb. So to be honest, I think the article I read the other day, I didn't really agree with it, because culture, you may even in some cases genetically, say almost semi-genetically inherited based on what the mother was eating or consuming. So yeah, it is all of this and more. But in order to have an easy way of understanding it, really, this is how we define it. It's just the way we do things around here. This is what culture is. You can think about it if you think about, say, a work culture. So think about the last time you started at a new job, or the last time you started at a new team as part of research, or anytime you started something new. You were getting used to the culture of the place. When you started at a new job, you didn't know, how are people interacting, what is okay to talk about, what is not okay to talk about. And slowly you adapted to this new culture. Really, what culture is in that case, in the work environment, it's just the way people do things at work, and that is the work culture. When you are used to one culture and you transition into another, that's when you have to accustom to the new ways of doing things, and thus adjusting to the new culture. Now, culture can be work culture, can be ethnic culture, which is the focus of what we're talking about today. But even within ethnic culture, think about your country, think about the country you were born, if you were not born in Australia, and think about the place where you were born. If you compare that place to other parts of the country, then also there are differences in culture. I can talk about myself. I'm from Greece originally, and I'm from the mainland, which has a different culture to the islands. And then on top of that, we are also bringing other pieces that, compiled, create who we are and how we see the world. We'll talk about that in a sec as well. Every culture, and this is something that people have been studying for decades, and I'm going to try to explain it in only 3 minutes, but please bear with me. But if there is many people, many sociologists have come up with different ways of understanding culture, because at the end of the day, culture is a lens through which we see the world. And there are different dimensions of culture. Say, the most basic one, which you may have heard about, is the collectivist versus individualist. Some cultures are more collectivist, and they prioritize, say, more, for example, groups or families. Others are more individualist. It doesn't mean, by the way, that anything is right or wrong. It's just different ways of doing things, different cultures. So hierarchy versus equality. Again, even some languages, if you think about it, they have a formal way of speaking to someone who is hierarchically higher than you. In English, this doesn't exist. It's one, and it's you for everyone. Whereas in other languages, in my language, I know there are 2 ways of speaking. And I'm told, I don't speak Thai, but I'm told that in Thai in particular, there are many ways, depending on who speaks to whom, that the language changes. So this adds both to hierarchy as well as formality of the language and the culture in general. So there is much more here. And if you think about yourself, you have certain ways of thinking about culture and about the world. And these all fall into this sliding scale. So we can't really say that one culture is collectivist or individualist. And many people over many decades have tried and have been coming up with their own, say, ranking of cultures as to from collectivist to individualist, or from hierarchical to more egalitarian. However, this changes quite a bit because we humans change. And we'll talk about changing cultures as well. But the one point I want to really draw your attention to on this side here is relationships. And why do I want to do that? Because for many of the people that fall into the COLD category, the culturally and linguistically diverse category in Australia, they're coming from cultures where relationships come first before tasks. I want to give you a very quick example, a very quick explanation of this. Let's go back to talking about work culture. What is the first thing that you do when you go into a new workplace? You get in, and after you say hello to everyone, they put you in a little room like the one that I'm in now, and they give you these many policies that you have to read through, and then tick that you read them, read, yes, I read it, and I agree. So this is the definition of a task first culture. And most workplaces have to be task first because there's no time to start with a relationship. So by definition, most workplaces are task first. So you go in with, what do I need to do? This is what needs to happen. That's my role, that's my job. If we think about this in a more, in the cultural sphere, it's quite similar. So there are many cultures. The English culture is one of those cultures that are more tasks first. So it's more important for the member of the culture to deliver on what it is that they're expected to do. For many other cultures, and for example, I can speak about particularly older cultures, the relationships are more important. So first you have to build relationship with a culture before you get them to do what you want them to do. As I said before, it's a sliding scale. So speaking about my country of origin, Greece, it's somewhere in the middle. So based on one of the rankings that I have seen. And I feel that it's, personally, then again, I feel that it sounds about right, but even within my group, I can see differences in how people are doing things, the different cultures. But we'll be talking a lot about relationships in this, in today's presentation. So question is, why engage COLD communities in research and related initiatives? Sometimes you may have to because it's very well defined within the project that you're applying for. But let's see practically why we need to do this. Firstly, Australia is more diverse than ever. Australia only accounts for 0.3 of the world population, yet 2.8 of the world's immigrants have come to Australia and have been coming to Australia. This is from 2016, it's a little bit older, but still the case. What does this mean practically? That out of 100 people who leave their homeland, 2.8 come to Australia, which has added to the diversity of this country. Now, how much has it added? Quite a bit. So this is the latest census, the 2022 census, where you can see first generation people in Australia, like myself, people who were born overseas, are 29.3% of the population. That's more than 1 in 4 people who are today in Australia were born overseas. Majority of those people as well, they have English as second language. 22.2% second generation, meaning practically that they have parents who were born overseas. This, without getting into too much detail, the time doesn't allow, but for this generation, for the second generation, this also comes with its own set of challenges. And let's think, for example, the fact that many second generation children, they have to, whether they like it or not, belong to 2 cultures, one at home and one outside home. Then again, language becomes a problem as well, because you may naturally, organically become the interpreter for the parents and the family. And then this also becomes an issue, and I know that from my work in aged care, when at a later age, the parents need to start receiving care, when language again becomes a problem, when the children who were born here, they don't have as good grasp of the language in order to be able to explain things. So it comes with its own set of challenges. We'll see them in a few slides, but what I wanted to talk about here, the question is, why do we need to include cold people in research. Because we see here that the first generation and the second generation together are more than 50%, or 51 point something percent of Australia's population. It means that more people in Australia are migrants and cold people rather than Australian-born Australians. So what does that mean? It means that there isn't a mainstream and then cold, because cold, and that's the name of our branch here, is the new mainstream. The new mainstream is that 51% of the population belong to culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Practically, we cannot just ignore 1 in 2 Australians when we are doing research. And these numbers are ever increasing, so we haven't seen a decline in those numbers. So practically, this is something that I personally, when I come across, I always think it's funny when there is say a mainstream stream of funding, and then there is a cold stream of funding that is a percentage of the mainstream. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at numbers that are they just speak for themselves, really. But this is why it is so important to not see diverse people as it's a good to also see what they have to say, but rather put them in the center of what is happening, because they are the ones who will be benefiting from the research that is taking place as well. Oops, my apologies. All right. So let's look a little bit deeper into the cold communities and their challenges. Culture is extremely complex, and you can think about yourselves as a person, where you belong in ethnic culture. Some of you may also be of mixed backgrounds, which means that you are bringing 2 sides or maybe more sides and viewpoints into your personality and how you view the world. And then as you're thinking about your ethnic culture, think of your views of some just indicative elements of what creates a view of the world. So education, gender, age, socioeconomic status. It means practically that even within one culture, there are all these different people that have exactly their own way of doing things and seeing things. So an asterisk here, it is very important, and as researchers, when we engage diverse communities and it's normal and it happens to anyone, but it is important to remember not to categorize everyone as, the non-mainstream, or even we cannot be speaking of the Italian community as if there is only one culture in the whole country. Some countries in particular, like for example, in China or in India, the cultures are so diverse within themselves, between themselves, that even the language changes. So the language are not mutually intelligible. So it's important to remember that we're dealing with complex individuals as much as we remember that when we're dealing with mainstream research, and not just categorizing a group as to, okay, this is what the Greeks do. And one person's opinion as well does not represent everyone in the group. It's just important to remember that. So culture is not just complex, but it's also very dynamic. And the easiest way for you to think of that is think of your culture and think of one of your grandparents. They're also part of the same culture, but in reality, what unites you with how they see the world is actually less than what may unite you with someone who's your age from a different culture. So culture changes a lot, and it is very dynamic. And even think of Adelaide, say, for example, where the things that were cool to do 30 years ago most likely are not today. And if today I don't know what, say, I don't know, Taylor Swift would cause a scene if she came to Adelaide. In 30 years, this may not be the case. The people who used to cause scenes 30 years ago in Adelaide, they are not as relevant anymore. So it changes quite a bit. And that is also important to note. on that particular point, I would like to raise as an example that the Greeks who came, for example, to Australia in the 50s, they came and they brought their own customs and their own ways of doing things. I came in Australia only 13 years ago in 2012. So to be, it's just, I'm going to say it as it is. I don't have a lot in common with the culture that came to Australia from the 50s and then created its own sub-branch of the Greek culture. So it is important to remember that as well, depending on what it is, the subject that you're trying to investigate, to get the right people in the room. That's an important point I wanted to raise. But for the cold people, there are some additional challenges. Some are obviously, I'm not even going to speak to them, like obviously limited English proficiency is a problem, an additional problem that people have to navigate. And you may have experienced it sometimes possibly as a tourist at another country, if you don't speak the language. If you have been on a holiday in a country where the alphabet is not Latin, you get a bit of a grasp as to a bit of an idea as to how one may find it difficult to navigate it. But again, remember that we may be going as tourists and we just want to go to the next museum and get to the next cocktail. We're not really interested in becoming part of the culture because our survival does not depend on that. But imagine if it did. So that is a problem there, of course. Unfamiliarity with established systems, things that we take for granted as to, for example, and I'll give you a real example. Someone called me yesterday. She has been in Australia for 3 years and she didn't understand superannuation. How does that work? So to someone who has been here for a long time, will understand how systems work. But then if someone doesn't know that, let's talk about salary sacrifice and stuff like that, that if you haven't experienced it before, you may have heard it, but you don't know exactly how it works. But think about this across the board. You don't, for someone who comes to Australia, they don't have a knowledge of the health system, the education system, the transport system, the owning a house. So there's so many things that someone needs to understand before they're able even to make decisions for themselves. So the next point is discrimination. Really, I don't need to talk much about this. Often people have low health literacy, think that many of their communities, many of the new and emerging communities as well that are coming to Australia now, they're coming from parts of the world where there has even been poverty or war, and obviously health literacy has not been a priority. So they come to Australia without having general knowledge that others may do. As an example, many years ago, like 15 years ago, I worked on a project with UNICEF, and we went to some remote parts of Asia, East Asia. And when I say remote, it was like 7-8 hours from the nearest other settlement. And there were people who did not know that smoking has negative effects on the health. So there was no connection between smoking and bad health at all, because of very low health literacy and because they were so far away that there was no, I would say, no easy way for information to get to them. And I'm talking about even at the beginning of, say, mobile phones, certainly before smartphones were a thing. As a matter of fact, just a side that was interesting was that the whole village had one phone, people had phones, but the whole village had one guy who would take the phones and go and charge them because they didn't have power in the village. So they would drive in the motorbike to the nearest station and then they'd charge everyone's phones and then come back. So literacy can be very low when it comes to health for many of the cold populations, particularly the new and emerging communities. The last point I want to raise here is mistrust of institutions. Again, many of these people are fleeing their countries. Others have not had the opportunities that they needed to have because of corruption or because of systems that have been unfair. So by default, many of those communities, they have a mistrust of, say, the police, or even in some cases, researchers because they have experiences of why does someone need to know these things? Why do they need to know what I think about a particular subject? So it is a bit of a touchy point there that you need to keep in mind, depending on which cultures you are planning to work with. I have some ideas around it, which I will discuss in a few slides. Okay. All right, so let's look at some strategies for engaging cult communities. I won't cover things that I'm sure you have already heard from other speakers, like, for example, the need for compensation and appreciating someone's time. I'm sure you've heard this many times before today, so I won't say anything about that. I will speak about culture specifically. So the first one is that it is very important, the co-design process, and I saw that you have had Agustina before a session on co-design, and I'm glad this has been the case because it is very important in order to ensure relevance. So for many cult communities, it is very important that, and because they are more hierarchical, leadership is more important than, say, other cultures that are more egalitarian. But for certain communities, community leaders, they need to have a say because the rest of the community, they will look at them in order for something to be approved or not approved. And for the community to participate or not participate in something. So as communities look at the community leaders, it is important to partner with community leaders and with multicultural organizations. So many communities that have their own associations that come together. In our case, we are the big body, so we represent those communities as well, and we hold very regular meetings with them in order to engage them in the co-design, not just in research, but pretty much in anything that we do. So that's very important. The other point here is the co-creation of information materials as you are performing your research. It's important to co-create the materials and tools with community input. Just today here, and I thought I was going to be a little bit late before because I was literally running, because we had a consultation this morning here with 21 people representing 21 different communities in order to give the feedback on new tools and materials by an organization here in South Australia. So it is very important to get their feedback when you're developing those tools for communicating with them, because quite often there are certain assumptions that we make. And I'll give you an example. This actually came up this morning at the consultation. So for an older Italian person who has come here in the 50s to just translate material into Italian on, say, by Google, or even if you get a translator to do that for you, like officially, there are two significant problems there. The first one is that for the older person to understand this, it means that they need to know how to read. For many of these people, the case is that they did not have the chance, particularly the children of the war, they didn't have a chance to actually go to school. So they don't have the ability to read. The second point is that even if they do, the language has changed so much in the past 70 years that what is colloquial Italian today is not what these people are speaking. They're speaking dialects. So just translating something into a modern version of the language, it won't really get them to understand the information. So important for you to engage them if you are looking at working with specific communities. And finally, moving from researching on to researching with. This is just another way of saying what I already said. Okay, this is where it comes back again, this word relationships. For diverse communities, relationship is the most important. It's the beginning and the end of everything. And I say this not just in the context of the new mainstream that I'm talking about today, but also as an organization at MCCSA, we understand that this is the most important thing that we need to be doing with all our organizations members, keep the conversation going, build trust and build relationships, because this is what is going to get people to actually become involved. So if you are looking at working with specific communities, it's important to engage early and regularly rather than when you need the input. Why is that? Because this is where relationship versus task first comes in. So for certain communities, and I have worked with previously, before MCCSA, I have worked in aging and aged care, and I'm going to put it in reverse commas, in mainstream organizations. But while I was doing that, and I was working, say, with RSLs, I would go to the RSLs, engage with the older people there, and it would have been, generally speaking, easy for me to get to where I need to get, because the process is task-oriented and the audience were task-oriented. So it was what do we need to do? That's it, done. Whereas with diverse communities that are coming from different cultures, relationships are more important. So you need to first have the relationship in place in order to get them to do what you want them to do. It's important to remember. The other one is cultural protocols. So many cultures have their elders, have gender norms, community hierarchies that you need to be aware of when engaging with them. Transparency about project goals, for sure. And finally, closing the loop, obviously, sharing the outcomes and how the input was used is adding to the trust building, because you will need them again. And I can tell you that now, I have seen this here before. We do different trials and different research for different organizations, private business. And I have seen that when organizations have actually done this last step, the communities are so keen to come back. And there are some relationships that we help build over the years with institutions or businesses and specific communities, and they always come together. And every time one has something to research into, they want to be working with these people again, because now it's a very easy thing to do. They don't even, like, sometimes, we don't even have to say, go through our membership list to get the people to come in here. We just call one and we say, we need 10 Spanish-speaking females over the age of 55 who have not accessed aged care before, whatever. So it's that easy to do, but it has to do with relationship building. Developing cultural intelligence. So cultural intelligence is developing your understanding of cultural diversity in order to be able to work and communicate with people from all cultural backgrounds. People quite often, they see this as they think intelligence and competence are the same thing, but we see this as two separate things. Cultural intelligence focuses on the person. You need to be culturally intelligent in order to be able to navigate diversity. Cultural competence has to do with the organization more. An organization that has, the right policies in place and the right frameworks in place can be culturally competent. But these two things are separate, and you would need to work on your cultural intelligence. I have some suggestions on that in a couple of slides. And finally, the fourth point I wanted to raise here is empowerment and capacity building. So it is important to train the community members as co-facilitators. You will see, this is a very important point, really. I can't stress this enough. Quite often I will see at New Mainstream, we have the capability to, if someone is looking for a diverse group, we can just get that group together and get the researcher to come in and do what they have to do. But where quite often they fall flat is they have this approach of, okay, I just need to speak to diverse people, and here they are in the room, and I'm just going to go with what I had prepared. But the thing is, it is very important, in order for this not to fall flat, to train some of the community members. So, for example, the elders or the community leaders to be part of the conversation on your side of things. So not just answering questions. So I think that's very important. Supporting advisory boards, reference groups, the more you're able to involve diverse people in your work, the better it's going to be. If budgets and time allows, we've seen this working before, providing some workshops in return for their participation. And particularly, the final point is involving communities in the implementation and evaluation, as I made the point before. The last point, I'm sure I don't need to speak to, because that's really at the core of what you do, benefiting the people of South Australia. Okay, so where to from here? There's this very short action plan that you can have a look at. So the first thing you need to do when you are planning to engage people of diverse communities, diverse backgrounds, is to take time to understand the cultural backgrounds of your target groups. And the more important thing here sometimes is of your own colleagues as well. Most of you, I would think, are part, and going by statistics here, are part of multicultural teams. So you don't just need to understand how the people you are working with, like the communities you're engaging with, how they're thinking about things, but how about the people you're next to? How do they see things? When you co-designing, when you are designing the tools that you're going to be using, what is their viewpoint? How are they seeing things? So it is important to understand that as well. There are, just as an easy start there, I can mention, you can look up the SBS, a cultural atlas that covers all cultures in Australia. Great starting point to understand how other cultures see and view the world. And I was going to say there, that remember that we are dealing with complex individuals, and even that cannot cover everyone belonging into one particular culture. The next point is building long-term relationships with multicultural organizations and community leaders. MCCSA falls here, so we will be able to connect you with organizations and communities. But if for whatever reason you're working with specific communities, 2 or 3, and you want to do this yourselves, then I would definitely recommend making it a process. Don't just get to them just before you need their input. And finally, working on strengthening your cultural intelligence by participating in training. There are trainings online. Cultural Q as well, which is our training branch at MCCSA. We do that, and I have to say, we have, don't want to toot our own horn, but we have done quite a good job in that, particularly because our mentor has been Robert Bean, one of Australia's leading interculturalists, who retired a few years ago, and then he got us under his wing, and his 40 years of research have been transformed into our training programs that we offer at Cultural Q. And cultural intelligence is one of our most popular ones, which we have delivered across the board, from universities and local government to banks to for-profit businesses and everyone in between. So keep an eye out for when we're running. We do 1 or 2 per year that are open to anyone. Otherwise, if you have the capability, or if you belong into an organization, you could even start the conversation as to how we can come and train the whole team there. But yeah, you can connect with us on social media, have a little bit at the end, and then you can be on top of when it is the next time we're offering a public, open to the public training. Then we also have been speaking about the new mainstream. And what the new mainstream is a service that provides support at every stage of the engagement process, from finding the right people you want to be speaking to and having them in the room, to even facilitating the consultations if you prefer that. So we're able to assist at any level you require, and whether this is minimal, as I said, just getting the people you want in the room, to all the way, for example, running some of the sessions on your behalf if you would like that. So we're ready to do anything at this stage for you to support you. So this is a very cute photo. I think these are some of the people that we work with at MCCSA. This is taken here in Adelaide, obviously, and The reason why I have this photo here is because I wanted to stress the fact that we work with, from babies, from new mothers to people who just arrived in Australia, to people who have been here for a long time, to older people with diverse backgrounds. And we have done research projects all the way from, as I said, new mothers all the way to palliative care. So we work with very diverse communities. And what I mean by that is we have 131 member organizations who are all community associations that represent 85% of the total cold population in South Australia. And some of you can see here a list of some of the partners that we have worked with in the past, from universities to federal government, state government, local government, and there are many organizations, private businesses as well that we just don't have the room on the slide to put them there. But we have worked across the board and we are able to support with that. Okay. So I really don't know how I'm going with time, if anyone's still on the call or if I'm just, okay, good. Good. Yes, I just wanted to thank you for your attention, and this is how to stay in touch. We are on these platforms, LinkedIn in particular, Facebook as well, more community stuff on Facebook, which, by the way, you're most welcome to attend any of our events that we do. And if you just want to come and get a feel and have a talk to talk to the people that either work for MCCSA or the community members who come, you're most welcome to join any of our events. My email is there. If you want to learn more about the new mainstream, just Google it. And this is our website as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, Agustina. And if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, George. I really loved this presentation, and you touched on so many points that we always cover in our basic consumer and community involvement training. At the end of the day, it's about building the trust and building the relationships and understanding, the others' points of views, and acknowledging that other people can have other views, and is welcoming that into the work that you're doing. And you're right, we did have a spotlight series on co-design. So if anyone's interested in delving in deeper into that aspect, how to actually do co-design, we have a whole spotlight series on that topic. There are a few questions that have popped up during your presentation in the chat and the Q&A. Two were similar. So one, someone asked around, given that researchers often have low funds to work with, to dedicate to CCI, consumer and community involvement, someone asked, what are free or affordable translation and interpreting services that are available? But in parallel, someone else also asked, similarly to relating to the limitations around funds, if budget and time aren't limited, it's a great opportunity for engagement, but usually there are limitations with funds, and usually researchers only have enough money to engage 2 or maybe 3 consumers on their project, or community members for a few hours during an engagement. So what's a realistic approach for achieving diverse engagement when time and money is limited?
Mm-hmm. The answer to this is relationships. So the most important thing to do is to reach out to a community that you want to work with, explain what is the reality of the program, what you're trying to achieve, and there are going to be people who will be very happy to help within the budget constraints that you may have. Obviously, it'll be great if we all had more money in order to be able to do more things. But I understand the concern, and I completely understand the concern. But this is how I would recommend doing it. If you decide to work with a particular community, reach out to them, meet with one of the community leaders, explain what it is that you're trying to do, and you'll be surprised. There will be quite a few people who would, depending on the subject, who would be interested in participating in that subject.
So interesting.
And to answer the other point, sorry, about the translation. So there is, obviously, and there are tools out there. There are tools online that you can use to translate documents and whatnot. Depending on, be mindful of the guidelines in terms of, for example, whether you need to engage a translator or an interpreter for something that it isn't working. But if it is, say, communication that you want to translate, your average AI at the moment does excellent work with that. However, what I would recommend is even that you could speak to the community itself, speak to the community members themselves, and see if you can engage them to help you with what is the best way you can reach out to the people you're trying to reach. And why I'm saying that is because as I said before, quite often, even if we translate something, it doesn't mean much to the end user if the end user speaks a dialect of the language that we're trying to get to, or if the information is presented in ways that are not easy for people to understand. If even if I don't want to get too theoretical now, but even the way we present information in the Western world, if I ask you to think of a timeline of events, most of the time you will think of events in a line, because firstly, the word timeline has the word line in it.
Yeah.
But secondly, we think of time the way we write. So we think of it as if it's going from left to right. Even that, for example, just having a one solution for every community just by translation may not work, when others may be used in thinking about processes in a different way, say from top to bottom or from right to left. But yeah, engage the community members.
So interesting. And I also really like the insight around connect with leaders, to in considering that some communities, value the hierarchy of the relationship. So like that leaders are actually so important in this context. And another thing that really struck me is that 51% of Australia is called.
No.
Yeah,
I know, that's right.
That chart was really, really enlightening. So it was really incredible to just have that shown.
And I try to say this to people, and I'm assuming that there may be some on the call, but I try to also say this to people like myself who are of diverse backgrounds, that our way of thinking also needs to shift. We need to see ourselves as being part of the mainstream. And engaging other people who are part of the mainstream, or the new mainstream that it's taking place.
So interesting, George. Someone else had two questions. Someone was wondering if you can comment on the issues that arise from using a single term to classify a very diverse and large group of people. This term and all the assumptions that go with it is used to direct research agendas and approaches to engagement. And then that person has another question, but perhaps you can answer that one first. Noting that we have 7 minutes, and I'm sure that this is a broad topic.
Yes, absolutely. It is very broad. Look, institutions, and for practical reasons, they will have to come up with some minimal, common denominators of how we can describe different community groups. As Multicultural Communities Council, we do advocate for the diverse groups to not be an add-on in research, but be one of the main focal points of research. So let me try and answer this in one sentence. So I personally, I will say, I don't agree. I don't think it is, the right thing to do. However, I do see, and I'll be lying if I said I didn't, that, in order to create frameworks and in order to create processes, we need to come up with ways that will be understood by everyone as to what it is that we mean. But what we do, and we do that quite a lot here at MCCSA, is we're trying to change how people are thinking about these groups. And we have this quite a bit of progress compared to how how we moved from the new Australians of the 1950s all the way to the multicultural communities that are forming part of the heart of Australia today.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. And then the second question from this person, and this can be our last question, unless anyone else from the room has any comments to add or feedback for George. The question is, you made an interesting point about not researching on, but with the communities. Do you have any thoughts about research being led by called researchers, leaders, and consumers themselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's absolutely ideal if you could engage researchers from that community in order to work with that community. Obviously, the cultural understanding, cultural intelligence will be more developed within that particular context. At the new mainstream, we are a team of people and facilitators from different cultural backgrounds. Obviously, we cannot cover every single culture, as in to understand every single culture, and no one is an expert even on their own culture. Generally, no one. And if you think you are, I can tell you that there are people in your culture who just really believe things should be done differently to how you think they should be done. So no one's an expert, and the ideal is to involve cold researchers 100%. But in cases when this is not possible, then the alternative is developing your own cultural intelligence in order to be able to understand the why people are doing things and where they're coming from. As part of our training, as a matter of fact, we do talk a lot about the sliding scales of where cultures are coming from and where they are, how and what are the things that have shaped their viewpoints of the world. So even though it is not a one-size-fits-all solution, it is a starting point in order to understand the whys.
So interesting. I think that's a great way to end the presentation, George. Thank you to everyone who has joined. George, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing so I can share my slide again. And can you see that? I just want to direct people to next week's webinar. We will be inviting Jamita Kurji from the Kids Research Institute, and she'll be co-presenting with Angelica Ojinaka-Silakis from the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. And they are highly experienced in engaging youth and children in research. So they'll share their insights on that topic next week, which will be the last webinar on this series on this topic. Just a plug for our Consumer and Community Involvement Masterclass. It's coming up September 16. Registrations are currently open. There are 20 spots for researchers and 20 spots for community members who are interested in engaging in research. So, George, if you want to promote this to the communities in the MCCSA, it'd be fantastic. And yes, so it's a great day. We've hosted this around 3 times so far, or twice, and it's a hands-on session for both researchers and consumers to learn with and from each other. And we delve into how to do it, why is it important, what are the considerations around recruitment, and a few modules led by our co-host, consumer reps, who delve into communication and sharing of experiences. So that's it for today. Please stay connected to Health Translation SA. We have different ways that you can remain connected. Join our newsletter, our networks, or keep watching the Spotlight series. So on that note, I will close the webinar. Thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you, George, for your presentation and your time. It was fantastic. And we hope to see you all again next week. Thank you.